let's talk about the other side.
Hmm.
Um, how do you deal with the adoption of AI, and how do you sort of rationalize? We led the show with this conversation about the Pope and the fact that it introduced all these sort of cultural dynamics that we need to be aware of. There are a couple of interesting pieces of research here. One that you identified in an article, I guess it's not really research, but an article that I pulled together. And it was interesting how they sort of hit the yin and yang here of this. The one, and I happened to see this one across too, I thought it was fascinating. So this is, the first is a piece of research that basically these researchers looked at the, I guess they're calling cognitive debt, but this idea that if people started using ChatGPT, and this wasn't really specific, they use ChatGPT, but theoretically any LLM would do this, or any generative AI model would do this, that it actually caused a like a negative impact on their ability to perform cognitively. Um, and and so there's sort of this idea of, well, we have to be careful of how this is being leveraged. And then the flip side, and I think we need to talk about these because they're sort of two sides of the same coin, is this article from the Financial Times. It talked about that AI alone can't solve the productivity puzzle. It's the name of it. And it basically talks about how, in fact, I even highlighted that AI is fabulous, or at least LLMs right now are fabulous at dealing with these sort of routine things, but they are really, accelerators of that. And what they miss is the ability of sort of taking the next leap. And it says, a model, I'll just quote some of this because it was fascinating, right? A model trained before Galileo would have parroted a geocentric universe, fed 19th century texts that would have proved human flight impossible before the Wright brothers succeeded, right? And on and on and on.
Hmm.
That right now, that's what they're trained on, but they don't know what's not possible yet, right? And so you sort of put these two together, and you can see the irony of the risk that AI potentially poses, that it creates this endless loop. And I think as a CIO whose job is to figure out how you put AI to use in your organization, this is the guts of it right here, right? Getting this right and figuring out how to leverage it effectively to create advantage is going to be critical. So, what was your take on these two?
Yeah, starting with the idea of cognitive debt. So there's a study done by some scientists who first asked basically one group of people to use LLMs 3 times to write an essay, and then asked another group of people to write 3 essays the normal way, like a human being, write it or type it. And then the fourth time, they switched each one. So the people writing 3 essays used LLMs, were able to use LLMs for the fourth, while the people who had only been using LLMs the first 3 times had to write a manual essay the fourth time. And the people doing it for the fourth, people who had to make that switch from LLM to writing, like they lost part of their brain, basically. They were less able to write essays. They were less able to quote their own work that they had written. Like they were just losing working memory associated with presenting what their own thoughts were because of the shortcuts associated with the LLMs. So I think it's just a precautionary tale that we can't lean on LLMs for everything. It can't use it as a crutch. We have to use it as a tool. We should be using LLMs to counter and to really critique what we do rather than simply taking what it does at face value and taking that as an end all be all.
So there are a couple of interesting points. Is this research calls out that they did not break this down and look at sort of the component structure of essay writing, right? They did not look at, were people using it just for ideation? Were they using it for actual content generation? What were they using it for? And I think that matters. So that's the first point.
Right.
But the second point of it is, I think, uh, to me, I think it's a valid cautionary note, meaning that as an employer, if we're looking at this organizationally, I think we need to be deliberate with how we leverage AI and recognize that I find the cognitive piece of this fascinating, and I don't want to discount it out of hand. But I also make it sort of akin to like GPS,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I grew up, I'm going to date myself, in the age of Thomas guides, right? And I'm from LA, right? Where I had to carry around 4 of them because I would, they were all, one map wasn't big enough to carry it all, where these big books of maps. And I knew LA like the back of my hand because I drove all over, and you would have to look at the map and orient yourself and go through this whole process. And it was a cognitive load. I had to really process and think and associate with landmarks and all of this process. And that's great. I can still navigate in my sleep around all of LA because of it. I go any place else today. I live in New York. I don't own a car anymore. But if I go any place and I have a car, what do I have? I have a GPS system.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot tell you the number of times where it's like I drive from the hotel to wherever I'm going, and I wake up and or not wake up, but I look up and I realize I have no idea how I got here.
Yeah.
And the question is, does it matter? Is it actually useful for me to know how to navigate a city if I have this tool? Now, they're going to be purists and say, of course you should. I think there's a lot of things in our society today, in our modern society, that we as humans no longer know how to do. At least most of us don't know how to do, because we've deployed technology that does so much of that for us. Like I mean, God forbid if there's some, catastrophe, I'm going to come to your house because I can't grow a crop to save my life. I probably can't hunt anymore. I mean, I'm going to starve, right? I cannot raise my own food.
Yeah.
And I think there's a whole lot of things like this. And so part of me sees this as alarmist, because there's no question that AI is going to fundamentally change the nature of work, of how we interact and the things we have to do. But part of me says, is this a cause of concern? Like I said, I don't want to dismiss it out of hand, but I think, to me, the wake up call for me is that we need to be intentful and aware and make sure that if we're going to deploy AI for this, especially based on this research, that we're okay maybe giving up the skill set because we may in fact lose it over time as an employee base. So
yeah,
I think
I think this sets some fundamental and kind of philosophical questions on what is meaningful from a work perspective. For instance, filling out an expense report, I consider that to be a meaningless task. And I say that as someone who literally runs a company. Like, I never want anybody to fill out any more paperwork than necessary to get anything done. I consider that entire thing a waste of time, other than we have to do it for tax reasons. But I don't care if you ever memorize how an expense report is done. I would be happy to have AI take over that 100% for everybody forevermore, for any reason. Whereas there are aspects of being able to write down how to do something or how to think through a problem that are vital. If you cannot learn from, say, a YouTube video and then being able to independently recreate how to do that because it's now going to be part of your job, that's a problem, because it means you don't really know how to learn something. And we have to figure out which aspects are actually important, which aspects are busy work or stupid work, or just happen once a year and don't really need to be memorized. But we do have to, but this might mean that we have to actually promote some work that we think of as not trivial in some aspects, because the mental ability associated with doing that trivial work ends up being important to the rest of the job in some way.